And welcome, everyone. We're going to start real quickly by just introducing ourselves. Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Lisa Morzell.
Cindy Carlisle.
Aaron Brockett.
Suzanne Jones.
Sam Weaver.
And Mary Young.
So I'm Jane Brodigam. I'm the city manager.
And I'm Tom Carr. I'm the city attorney.
I'm Greg Test. I'm the police chief.
And we just want to start off by welcoming everyone here tonight. It's really heartening to see the turnout. And I'll just note that we have 2 council members who couldn't be here on such short notice. One of them will be coming later, but I know this is important to them, and they'll be wanting to engage in further conversations. I'll just say that this is a community that cares about matters of consequence, and your presence here shows that, and that's a really good thing. So thank you for being here. While there is a lot that I and other city council members could say tonight, probably want to say tonight, tonight is about us listening. I think, as you know, we are legally obligated to withhold judgment and be restrained in our remarks as we wait to receive the results of the official investigation. But regardless of the outcome of that investigation, we know that this incident has already caused a lot of pain in our community. We want to acknowledge that. And if anything, it has underscored the gap. Well, it underscores something that we already knew from surveys. It underscores the gap between the welcoming, inclusive community that we aspire to be and actually what it feels like for people of color living in this community. But even without this incident, we already knew that we had work to do on racism in our community. We are engaging in some of that work, but we obviously have a lot more to do. And we look forward to engaging with you as we move forward with that work. And so with that, let's turn to this night's purpose, and that is to hear from all of you. So we've changed things around a bit. This is a little bit of a hybrid. Part of it is the seating arrangements. We are down here with you, and you can be up there talking to us in hopes of making this formal space a little more welcoming. In order to hear from everybody tonight, there's a lot of people signed up. We're going to stick to our regular 2 minutes apiece. We totally understand that that's not enough time, but that's one way to be able to hear from others, from all of you. And unless you're pooling with others, if you have 2 other people you're pooling with, you can have 4 minutes. 4 minutes, right. Our intention is to provide space and time for all the perspectives in the room. I think it'll be helpful to know that this listening session is just the first step in a much longer conversation, and we recognize that, and we see this as the beginning of an ongoing series of forums and conversations about race. And the design of that will vary in recognition that tonight's format may not work for everybody, but we're committed to moving that forward. We understand that the topic here tonight is painful and challenging, and we fully expect to hear some testimony that has anger and frustration. In order for this to be a safe space, we ask that we all do our best to respect the variety of viewpoints we may hear and to refrain from clapping or providing verbal commentary. Some people like to do this if they agree. We just want it to be a safe space, and so that's one way we can do that. With that, I think we're ready to begin. We are honored tonight to be joined by a spiritual leader and an artist, a poet, who are going to help start us off in a place of reflection. So with that, I'd like to invite Mary Kate Rejui, to the podium, and then we'll be followed by the poet Norman Johnson.
Thank you for the privilege of offering some words of invocation today for a hard and necessary conversation. I am aware of the privilege of my voice, and I offer it as one of many. Before we begin, I want to invite you to turn to a neighbor and simply smile a welcoming smile. Thank you. So let us begin in solidarity first with the people of Christchurch, New Zealand. And I would like to offer some seconds of silence. In those brief seconds, may we renounce and repudiate the white supremacy and the will to violence that caused this. And now let us move from that incident of individual hate and violence, which is so easy to condemn and from which to separate ourselves, to this community in which we live. We give thanks for the dignity of all persons, for the gift of humanity, for the will to recognize it in those we know, those we don't know, those we see, those we don't see. We give thanks for those who have said yes to public service and who lead the city of Boulder on our behalf, this council and our civic leaders. We give thanks for those who serve this community for the common good, especially the police, the firefighters, the first responders who enter into danger for the safety of others. And we give thanks for the call to show up here this evening, for the will and courage to speak and to listen, for the desire to become a more whole, more true, and more just community. So let us now pause and prepare our hearts and minds to listen. I know first that the words we and us so often have not included all persons, all voices, the fullness of humanity. May all whose skin is like mine acknowledge the privilege in which we have moved in the world, fears we have not had for ourselves and our children. Let us acknowledge that the sin and brokenness of racism are in our daily life, seen and unseen, acknowledged and unacknowledged. And let us make a lament, a song of sadness for the history we have received, for the systemic racism that persists. May we repent of our blindness to the depth of hurt and damage done. May we listen before we speak. Listen to the experience of our neighbors. Listen. I invite you for a moment to close your eyes and to listen to the history of our city and our state, the indigenous persons who lived here for centuries, the ancestors of our Latinx community removed and slaughtered, the laborers of color who traveled, worked, lived, and died without civil rights or social respect, the internment of Japanese persons during wartime, the Black families and students at our beloved university who lived down on Goss Street because they were not permitted to live on campus. The grief and the lament are so great. By the waters of Babylon we sat down and wept. How can we sing in a strange land? And for those among us who are old enough, long in the tooth enough to remember and to be thinking, Yet we are that Colorado city that elected one of the first black mayors in the state. We are past this. Pause, stop, listen. One Penfield Tate, that was his name. May he and Ellen rest in peace. One Penfield Tate was not the antidote or the cure to the ills of the world surrounding us here. So let us accept the past and the legacy inherited, and let us be angry that the ideals of justice and fairness are not here yet, not for all persons. Augustine of Hippo said this: hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. For this hope, then, let us offer up our anger and move to courage. Courage to listen, courage for those who are weary of the fight, courage for self-reflection, courage for hard conversations, courage to admit mistakes and failures, courage to share power and accountability, courage to give up for the sake of others, courage to listen to the voices not yet heard, courage to reject simple answers and to seek a shared, complex way forward. Courage to be a whole community, diverse in both intent and reality. And at last, we know that the healing of hurt cannot and will not be done in one meeting, one moment, or one day. But the healing of the hurt will never be done without living in moments and meetings of truth and reconciliation and love. These are the most powerful healers in the world. May we seek them tonight and forever, without fear, in all honesty, and with liberty, love, and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will hear from the poet Norma Johnson.
I have well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. But truly, thank you for being here. I have a collection of poems called Poems for My White Friends. And largely it was inspired by living in Boulder. This was the first poem that I wrote in that collection. And it's called A Poem for My White Friends. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you about my real life, the one that haunts me most days. It comes in moments at a time, triggered by a look, an attitude, a sensing of superiority, of blatant ignorance, of good-meaning intention, dripping crap down my face. I didn't tell you about the look they gave me when I opened my door and they saw black me standing there, their mouths agape, their thoughts running loudly through my head. I didn't tell you about being followed through the store and how I obediently kept my hands and my bag in plain sight. I didn't tell you how quickly they looked away when I catch them staring at me in the restaurant and standing in the supermarket line. I didn't tell you how the clerk pretended the white woman was standing at the counter before I had and waited on her first. I didn't tell you how I have to take a really deep, long breath every time before I walk into a room full of white people. I didn't tell you that in the meeting, the classroom, and the workshop, when the subject of diversity comes up, they all look at me as if I am the spokesperson for the whole nation of people of color. And I didn't tell you that when diversity isn't mentioned and needs to be, I'm too often the one who has to point it out. I didn't tell you how many times white people say to me, in one way or another, "You're different," because they felt comfortable with me, and that didn't fit their mold of what they figured a black person was like. I didn't tell you how disappointed that white man was when, after eagerly questioning me, found out that I was not the exotic Nubian he had fantasized, but just another Negro girl from New Jersey. I didn't tell you about the white woman, a stranger who chose out of all the white people around us to sit next to me and proceed to tell me all about her favorite black performers and her black friends and how this country needs to take integration to the next level so I could see how her life is an example of that. I didn't tell you about the anger I stuffed down when that dreadlocked young white boy gave me a high five and called me sister. I didn't tell you about the white woman I passed at twilight in the park, who tensed her body, tightened the grip on her purse, and walked a large, curved detour past me. I didn't tell you that my stomach clenches when I see a police car because it means I may not be safe. I didn't tell you that your world is not mine and that we are virtual worlds apart. I didn't tell you that while you can somehow think of yourself as ethnically expansive because you have a black friend, I, meanwhile, just still stay black. I didn't tell you that while you can walk boldly into any place you choose, I always have to consider where I am, who I'm with, and how I'm going to affect people. I didn't tell you that being a good person and being clueless can come in the same package. I didn't tell you about the comments you made that would take a lifetime of explaining how you bought into the system that keeps us all in our place. I didn't tell you about my day because I've been taught not to. And you have been taught not to even consider it. I didn't tell you about my day because then I would have to live it all over again. And I have to save that for tomorrow. I wrote that poem in 2008. And it's now being used nationally by educators to inspire discussions about race. I hope you've been able to hear, because that was my prayer when I wrote this, that it could be heard and felt. I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
We will break our own rules for Norma. Thank you for that. Now we're going to hear from our city manager, Jane Brodigam.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly hope that Ms. Johnson's prayers are answered tonight. Community members, city council, and city staff. 17 days ago, an African-American college student who was picking up trash was confronted by a Boulder police officer. Many of us have seen a video filmed by a community member that captured part of this interaction and are deeply troubled by what we observed. A thorough investigation into the police response is currently underway, and tonight I can share that former District Attorney Stan Garnett has agreed to conduct an independent review of this process. This incident has caused deep pain in our community, as well as in our city organization. As one of many leaders in our community and as someone who is accountable for the actions of local government, I want you to know that I am taking this challenge to heart. What happened on March 1st was unacceptable. It is time to confront our biases and learn from them so we can better serve our entire community. I want to publicly and personally apologize to Zaid Atkinson and his family. I am very sorry for the fear and pain that you must have endured in this incident. I cannot tell you how grateful and humbled I am by the example you have set for us in its aftermath. I understand you've said that you want to be part of positive change. My door and my heart is open to you. I'm committed to listening and learning from your experience and reflections you may have about next steps. At the same time, I understand our community's pain is not just about this one incident, and it goes beyond issues related to policing. We have heard courageous and personal testimony in this very room about microaggressions and other ways our institutional, structural, and individual biases and racism impact others. We received valuable and painful feedback as part of last year's inclusivity survey and at a Human Relations Commission forum that followed. And yet, here we are, still struggling in the wake of current events. I hear the anger and frustration in your individual and collective calls for justice. It's important to say that even before this incident, your input has made a difference. Last year, I set our city organization on a course to learn more about systemic racism and the impacts this scourge has on our community. Through our partnership with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, our intention was to gain a better understanding of this issue internally and prepare a group of city staff members to be able to authentically and sincerely listen to our community. We planned to begin public engagement later this year. Last week, I shared with city employees that we will accelerate our community engagement, and this is an organizational priority. I'm committed to making this happen in the weeks and months ahead. I hope some of you in this room might help us plan community conversations that will provide room for continued listening and empathy, while also resulting in clear action items we can work on together. Lastly, I want to speak for a moment to our police department. I want to be clear that I value the important work that you do in our community, and I share your commitment to ensuring that every officer goes home to his or her family safely after every shift. I believe that you are a department that strives for the utmost personal integrity and understands the importance of continuous improvement. I encourage each of you to see this incident as an opportunity and to take the courageous step of asking what you as a department can do to strengthen our community and promote meaningful change and healing. You have a chief who understands the challenges you face each day. He is also, and this is critical, fully committed to listening to our whole community, to feel their pain and search for solutions so we can better serve everyone who lives, works, and visits Boulder. I stand by Chief Greg Testa and thank him for his brave leadership. Like me, he is deeply troubled by examples of race-based biases in our community and is committed to self-reflection and making changes to support equity and inclusivity in our city. Ms. Johnson's powerful poem provides an important framework for all of us in Boulder. We like to think of ourselves as a progressive community, but this very perception may be our greatest obstacle. Good intentions are not enough. Our largely white and privileged community will continue to fail at dismantling racism until we recognize that the advantages most of us enjoy are not available to community members of color, and that the experiences many of our neighbors, visitors, and coworkers have here are not acceptable. I truly believe my role tonight is to listen, reflect, and to learn. Only then can we work together to chart a path toward creating a new future that improves safety, quality of life, and equity for everyone in Boulder. If we fail to take steps to understand our own complicity, we fail in our commitment to serve the public, and we break the trust we have worked so hard to earn. I thank you for continuing to keep this at the forefront of our minds. I assure you, this has affected me deeply, and other city employees as well, and I will be listening closely to each comment shared tonight. Thank you for being here. Mayor.
Thank you, City Manager. We're now going to turn to our invited guests, and we're honored to have Zaid Atkinson join us.
Hello? Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for showing up today, and I wanted to thank the poets for speaking. It takes a lot to be that raw. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the issues of racism, racial justice, and racial bias in our police and city government. These problems are long-standing, but they are too important to ignore. While the Boulder government is trying to create an appearance of racial sensitivity, this stance is for the sake of appearance only. I had guns pointed at me because of the color of my skin. This is unacceptable treatment of anyone. The police department is not capable of investigating itself, and I have asked for an independent review of what happened to me by a Boulder outsider. Instead, Boulder has picked a 9-year Boulder district attorney to do a secondary investigation. Boulder has not taken this request seriously, and I have been ignored, and my power has been taken away again. While I appreciate the speakers scheduled to be here today, these issues must be addressed with hard work and not lip service. Although I hope that this meeting brings the community together on these issues and points us towards progression, the problem will not and cannot be solved by a single town hall meeting, as we know. The meeting must be first and of many other steps in our progression. And I hope that the city is committed to doing that hard work. Tonight, I'm not going to get into details about the recent incident involving me. That needs to unfold as the investigation goes on. I will have more to say about the incident at a later time. What I can talk about tonight is my perspective as a member of the Boulder community and what I see in this community. I'm also here to listen and hear the views of others in our community. Creating community, like enforcing the law, is very important to having a successful society, but balance is critical to any system. We cannot tilt too far towards authoritarianism, towards weapons, and towards force. We must focus on empathy and compassion for ourselves, our neighbors, and to everyone in this city, and the whole world, the whole universe. The key to social sustainability, I believe, is serving others. I have found eternal love and happiness through serving others, by serving life and by serving the universe as well. Everything that we obtain in life will be taken from us at death. We are trained to obtain things, but rarely are we trained to give. I believe that this is one route to our disease and suffering. And so I think that we need to take the approach to race. I think that we need to take that approach to racism, to law enforcement, and to creating our community. We need an attitude of giving and service. We need an attitude of mindfulness and selflessness. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say tonight.
Zaid, thank you for your words and your presence here. We appreciate it. Next up is Annette James.
I'm Annette James. I am the president of NAACP Boulder County Chapter or Branch. The NAACP has been involved in informing effective law enforcement policies since its inception 110 years ago. The NAACP advocates for smarter, result-based criminal justice policies. We call for an end to racial profiling. We call for an end to racial disparities at all levels. The incident of March 1st was dire. It was traumatizing to the individual. It stagnated our community. And when I read in the paper that the one person in the community with the greatest amount of individual power categorized the incident as concerning, well, it was frankly insulting. It miscommunicates its severity. It diminishes our belief in the truthfulness of a right outcome. Well, here's a couple of things that we, Black people in Boulder, find concerning. We find it concerning that the most powerful entity in our community declined an invitation for dialogue, but chose instead to retreat behind the proverbial ongoing investigation gate. But when the gate opens, be it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We'll be waiting there. We'll be there again to extend an invitation for dialogue, for support, and for collaboration. We'll be there to ask that you move immediately to establish, embrace, and empower a citizen oversight board. We'll be there to ask that you promote Know Your Rights training, especially for Black citizens. We'll be there to ask that through policy, each officer uses clearly defined, truthful language when assessing a threat. Put down your bucket. Am I done? Put down your bucket. It's a life and death difference between drop your weapon. We will be there to hear your findings. We will be there to see what remedy you choose. Thank you.
Next up is Nikhil Mankinkar.
Good evening. I'm Nikhil Mankinkar. I'm the chair of the city's Human Relations Commission. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm also a native of Boulder, but I'm of Indian and Sikh American heritage, and I think the only person of color to be leading a city commission in a long time, probably since a decade ago when a friend of mine led the Human Relations Commission, and then a decade before that when Brenda Lyle led the commission. I was born and raised in Boulder. I grew up in this city. It's my hometown. In that time, I've had a very different experience from the people around me. The issues being discussed tonight, I've experienced this racism, discrimination, and felt the impact on my life and humanity and that of my family. In ways that are too much to get into tonight, I could have my own public hearing and talk all night to the council, so if you want to do that, just let me know. I may not want to. A lot of people in this room and watching tonight probably can't handle the truth about that, and some people think they know, but I'll just say you have no idea. For people of color, it isn't just one or two incidents. It's a consistent experience happening over and over again, every second of the day. And many times a day, you will be reminded of your place, put in your place, treated like you were less than in some way. The way people choose to interact with you, an inappropriate email they don't stop to think is racist, and on and on. The way you get looked at or questioned as you navigate spaces in your own hometown, when you have space to speak your truth and not. When people who should be your friends are so filled with resentment they can't even say a civil hello, make eye contact, and acknowledge your humanity. The assertion of white privilege by people is so consistent, you can't even think of a different way of being and experiencing life sometimes. To inflict that on someone, or to be a bystander in that, is unacceptable. The sad thing is, among all the people committing this racism, the white privilege allows them to deny it and say, but I am not a racist. I am not. I can't be racist. I'm a liberal. I'm a progressive. That is not me. In Boulder, there are no racists, they will say. But so how can so many people of color experience racism every single day then? And if there are no racists, as we repeatedly get told, how do you all plan to solve this problem? You can't solve a problem if the people in power and your next door neighbor won't even admit that there is one to begin with. 2 weeks ago, I presented on updates to the city's hate crimes law to the city council. What many in the community did not see is that it took 3 years of me working almost like a full-time job on it just to get it before the council. When people of color are leading on issues in the community that impact us on a day-to-day basis, why does it take such a long time to do something about it? White privilege is entitled, entitled, entitled. White privilege throws tantrums when its owner doesn't get its way. White privilege is angry when it doesn't get what it wants, despite being unqualified and mediocre at best. White privilege allows its owner to go unquestioned, to not be held accountable. There's always someone just like them to make excuses and rationalize away the poison that is inflicted so casually on those of us not born so privileged as to be able to escape it. Just 2 months ago, when I spoke at the Martin Luther King Day rally, I said that while we've accomplished some things and we should be proud of them as a city and on my own commission, we've made progress, but we still have a long way to go, and that peace and love only come through action. Action, action, action. I ask the council to stop the talking, to stop repeatedly asking people of color to tell you our stories and our trauma, and for the community to stop rationalizing away what we tell you and to take action. The time is now. The time is always now. Thank you.
So we have one more invited guest, and then we'll get to the public, and that is Guillermo Medina. Is Guillermo here? Okay, then. So now we will turn to, there's a lot of people signed up, and that's wonderful. Now we're going to start paying attention to the lights up there that give you 2 minutes. And with that, we're pleased to have the president of NAACP, Chuck Leaf.
Thank you all for being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly about the situation. The lawyer in me understands the comments about needing to wait for a process to be completed. The human in me says that I'm not prepared to wait to look at what I experienced on March 1st, an experience that a student at NAACP was unfairly targeted, was the victim of racism in this community. And despite the formality of the investigation, that feeling is not going to change for me. It hasn't changed in the last 15 days, and I do not imagine it changing going forward. At NAACP, we are working hard to invite a diverse community of faculty, staff, and students, and yet 3 days ago, I received an email from a poet of some renown, a man of color, who wrote to me as he was coming to decide whether to show up for our 40th summer writing program, asking me whether it was safe for him to come to Boulder, Colorado. It made me sick to receive that email, and yet it was completely understandable based on what he experienced from a distance about the community at this point. I believe that for us to do the work that we have to do, we have to decide how real we're prepared to get as a community. I'm incredibly proud of Zaid Atkinson for standing up so clearly and stating his truth. And I think the time has come now for us as a community to decide whether or not we're willing to hear that truth from person after person who has a story to tell. Are we prepared actually to give up the power that we have in engaging each other in discussing racism in this community? And to what other people have said, those of us who feel that we are good people and we are not racist people need to set that aside and realize that even good people and even non-racist people are racist in some cases. That's going to come up over and over again. And the opportunity we have right now in front of us, I believe, is to hear and learn from people whose direct experience has been so different from ours and is equally real and who have much to teach us. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of the community, but I'm more looking forward to a decision by this community that we will lean into what's uncomfortable in this conversation. This is not an academic exercise. This is not an intellectual exercise, but it's one that actually is something we have to feel into into. We have to lean into somatically, and we have to understand how we experience what we're experiencing deeply in our bodies, not just in our minds. And that's the work that I'm committed, Naropa is committed to doing with the city, and I hope it's something the community will embrace.
Thank you, President Leaf, and I think we're looking forward to working with you. I think I can speak for everyone here. Appreciate that. Manuela Cifuentes, and you are pooling with two people?
Juan is there.
1 and 2? Okay, you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Good Soldier, and I live on the occupied lands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute Nations. I'm here with Manuela Cifuentes and Juan Stewart. Neither of us are at all surprised at white police officers from the Boulder Police Department racially profiling a black man as a criminal for simply being black. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on March 9th, 2017, we both signed on to an email that went out to the Boulder City Council, among others, that exposed 3 racist videos created by a local band, Los Cheesies, and starring folks from Boulder and other parts of the county, including Lee Shanus and Sean Camden. This band had been hired to play at local events and paid for with taxpayer money. We had various complaints about the videos, including local leaders in brownface, fetishizing Asian women, objectifying women in general, but also specifically perpetuating stereotypes of black boys and men. I will read an excerpt from that email. The video also perpetuates the dangerous and ingrained stereotypes of blacks, particularly black men, as criminals. The character Stevie is presented as a lawyer and a judge that prosecutes all the scumbags of Vallejo, California, while the camera pans out to an image of a white plaintiff and a black defendant. Consider that through racial profiling, black males are disproportionately targeted by police through stops, searches, use of force, and juvenile arrest. That compared to their white counterparts, black youth and men are also more likely to receive prison terms and be sentenced to life without parole. Consider also the recent and highly publicized deaths of unarmed black youth and men at the hands of the police: Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, and how the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement has been met with the tone-deaf All Lives Matter rebuttal.
This email, to which Councilwoman Mary Young also signed on to, went out to various elected officials, including the Boulder City Council in place on March 9th, 2017. Aside from Mary Young, who I already mentioned, these emails went out. That council included Suzanne Jones, Sam Weaver, Aaron Brockett, Lisa Morzell, all on council still today, as well as Bob Yates, Jan Burton, Matt Applebaum, and Andrew Shoemaker. This message is also for you. Do you remember your response to that email? There was none. Deafening silence and earth-shattering inaction. You were so uncomfortable you opted to ignore the concerns raised in those emails. After all, this is Boulder, a community of white progressives that adamantly oppose racism. I really have no idea what went through your heads because you opted for silence. I imagine your thought process something like respected local white males engaging in and promoting racial stereotypes. Cannot be. They're good people. They co-founded a nonprofit that serves immigrants. They employ people of color. One of them married an immigrant. They must not have meant it. You were not alone in not responding. We also did not get a response from members of the Lafayette City Council, Louisville City Council, Longmont City Council, nobody on the Board of Education for the St. Vrain Valley or Boulder Valley school districts or their superintendents, none of the county commissioners, and on and on. I want you now to imagine what would have happened if you'd taken our concerns seriously. What if we would have had a conversation about the dehumanizing damage that comes from brownface and blackface and using Native imagery as mascots? What if we would have had a conversation about how racial profiling by the police has dangerous and sometimes fatal consequences? We're so lucky to still have you. And what if we'd also talk about how the media and pop culture contribute to racist beliefs, even among those who don't want to be racist? That was a missed opportunity. And now here we are. So I ask you to be introspective, and if you want to change Boulder, you have to change your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela and Elisa. Shirley.
Mayor, City Council members, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Shirley White. I'm a former member of your Human Relations Commission, and I want to ask you to consider something very specific, and that is, if you recall the Hillard and Hines report completed in February 2016, over 3 years ago, one of its key findings was that there wasn't enough and accurate data by race and ethnicity. And the Human Relations Commission at that time asked for the data to be compiled in a manner accordance with best practices. It's not a new practice in analyzing data in this way for communities who want to really understand how people move through the justice system. And so we asked for this data on a quarterly basis by the 15th of each month for the preceding quarter, and we haven't seen anything like that yet. The Human Relations Commission asked for it to the City Council. So I ask you to consider, as you listen to the folks tonight, what specific things you can do to demonstrate leadership as we try to grapple with and address some of these larger issues. And I would say that looking at data, that's the place to start. We don't need to rely on people being good, people being progressive, people checking their white privilege. We can look at the data, look at it by each decision stage, and the story will become obvious. And I encourage you to collaborate with the county. I'm glad to see the district attorney is here, to look at the entire criminal justice system of how people move through. And I think the story will be clear. I also ask you to explain to the community what happened with the diversity officer. What happened there? I think it's really unfair to hire a diversity officer, then all of a sudden she's not here. The community is wondering. It's really disrespectful to say that diversity is an important part of your work, and then to have something like that happen. Lastly, I'll just say you all had an opportunity a little over a year ago to have a person of color represent the city as mayor, and you all chose not to. And you decided to give in to this culture of politeness, and you didn't see the value of what that would mean to my 2 kids of color to have that. And so I ask you, in the words of our city manager, to look at your own complicity that contribute to this kind of environment.
As the next speaker comes up, 1 second. I just want to acknowledge Congressman Joe Neguse is here, and also DA Michael Doherty. They're here to listen, and we very much appreciate your presence and your service. So I wanted to acknowledge you. I know you guys can't necessarily stay the whole time. And with that, Gloria McVeigh.
Thanks. Hi, Gloria McVeigh, Boulder resident. It's been 2.5 weeks since the incident we're here to talk about tonight. And that incident could have ended in the death of a young black man, a resident of our city. Since that time, we've only heard about an officer going on leave and an internal investigation. If I were a person of color, I would not feel safer. I might feel more unsafe. Other cities that have had incidents like this, the same day the chief or the mayor holds a press conference to acknowledge the incident and the video that everyone has looked at by now. I understand you can't discuss personnel issues. I'm not really interested in the investigation that's going on right now. I'm interested in the department as a whole. What I would like to hear a chief say the day that this incident happened, starting immediately at the beginning of each shift, each officer must review video with a trainer or supervisor until everyone has reviewed it and answer the questions: what went wrong, what should have happened, and what would you do, each of you, in that situation for a better outcome. I admire and respect the Boulder Police Department, but I no longer trust our police department's training and judgment. I'm here tonight to urge council to act, to get involved, to do what is not supposed to be done. Find out what training is going on and what training is not going on. I know it would ruffle some feathers. I know you'd get resistance from the police department in interfering, but I'm asking you to interfere. what is the saying? Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. This is an extraordinary time. I'm asking for action from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Steve Bentley, you're pooling with two people?
I am, and I'd like to appreciate their minute and 45 seconds that I need. This is a poem I wrote in 2015 called The Thin Blue Line. There once was a kind on that thin blue line who would say to a young mind, "This community is mine." But now, all they see is hidden blue brutality, and it's no wonder they're all doing time. There's no stopping a chat, no helping anyone with this or that, just a choke and a bat if you happen to be black and walking around in one of those dark hooded hats. "Oh, your charges are lies," say their bosses with blind eyes. Protest lines are filled with their spies. Do not question why. They'll spray blind your eyes. When will they open their own and use their more human minds to realize it's neighbors and friends they live to despise? These are American families, too, that the blue terrorize. So whether you're a woman or you're black or brown or gay, in our land it should always be okay to live in whatever peaceful way and always be free to say what they say. We should help one another live fully the promise of the freedom and not the finance within the American way. But now this blue bigotry is causing such strife with its untreated hate and no thought or value for the colorful life. Perhaps we need women and some colorful men who lead in the kind way of the vigilant Deputy Fife, who too every day would carry a gun, but Barney the man had no satellite van or big tactical plan. And in the early morning hours after he'd taken his shower, put on his badge of power, that power was kept restrained, for in his pocket remained what could cause blood stains and leave a neighbor with nothing but a flower. Oh, he'd leave his home armed, but protect all from harm, endearing neighbors with charm. Blue does not have to be synonymous with harm. It's up to those who oversee to change the course and harbor the force of the rising blue seas. It's true, there's crime. That's quite plain to see. But fear is a path that has no release. Our future is not bound by history's silent sound. There's already enough black blood that's been spilled on the ground to strike fear in our children round after round, in spite of our anthem's victorious sound. And for freedom, this world all around, we fight and we heave for those who are still bound by those who believe and beat and deceive, leaving families to grieve. Today in our land, day after day, the blue, by their actions, ceaselessly say that freedom sound is no longer around. Is that sound still found in my hometown? Or am I too likely to be put in the ground by the carefree release of just one more round? There's no need to worry. No question will sound. Instead of throwing black men into the pound, open your blue and white eyes. Take a look around. This grand land abounds. There's room enough around to reach out to neighbors who need a new lease. Instead of buying drones and monitoring phones, we all should be focusing on building the peace. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Mark Gilban.
I grew up in 1970s Miami when US 1 was still called South Dixie Highway. I'm very familiar with overt white nationalism that's unfortunately on the rise. And I've been here in Boulder for 30 years. That ignorance of white nationalism is horrible, but isn't Boulder great? For whom veneer is more insidious and pernicious because it pretends all the time to be something different. I'm also someone who's lived here for over 3 decades, and I've raised 3 children, 2 biracial here. I know something about racism in Boulder. Not enough has changed since Ruth K. Flowers came to a closed Boulder in 1917, nor 1972 when she talked to BHS and said that Boulder systemically discriminates people of color, education, housing, economic, and social opportunities. And the truth is nothing's changed because person after person before me has already come up and said that they haven't been listened to. And I've been a close watcher of this council. Not only do you say racist things over and over again, neighborhood character. I listened to Lisa on the dais say the outsiders are invading our open space. Cindy Carlisle got up and didn't want to listen to me the last time I was here because she doesn't like the way I deliver things. Well, you know what? It's about time that you all open up. I watched Sam dismiss Charles Leaf last Tuesday and say, oh, go talk to the Human Relations Committee. And it wasn't only me that was offended by that. I've watched you be smug and arrogant. I've watched people be dismissed by this council, and it's this council's responsibility to do something.
Thanks, Mark. Jude Landsman.
I'm Jude Landsman. I'm a local artist, mother of both white and biracial children, and a long-term social justice advocate. Thank you, City Council members, for your consideration and for arranging this forum. It is an inclusive and responsive step. While it is necessary to be heard and to listen, to have integrity, there must be follow-through. This story has been told already. The Hillard Hines report told it in 2016. It's time now for action in our community. I think that's a theme I've been hearing. The NAACP Boulder branch members, of which I am one, demand an independent community oversight board with broad investigatory powers and binding rulings. Civil rights activist and writer and poet Audre Lorde speaks about action and change. She writes, "Guilt is not a response to anger. It is a response to one's own actions or lack of action. If it leads to change, then it can be useful, since it is then no longer guilt, but the beginning of knowledge. Boulder can do better than guilt. We can model best practices, we can act, we can be knowledgeable. Please support us as a community to move forward."
Al Peterson.
Al Peterson, I'm a Boulder native. I wanted to say, for me, the bubble is burst. I have friends who have been subject to the all too typical harassment reserved for our minority friends, whether that is some calls to the police that are inappropriate for reasons to harass neighbors while shopping at the hardware store or driving while black. Each instance involved a response that was more extreme than would have been executed on a white person and unwarranted in all cases. We all know from media exposure that sudden moves or actions by minorities that might seem innocent in another context are too often taken as aggressive or dangerous by law enforcement and result in death of innocent persons. We are fortunate that in this instance that did not occur. The danger was clearly evident in the law enforcement response. I am here because I'm tired of trying to rationalize the law enforcement responses towards my friends. I'm here because I want to build a better Boulder, where skin color is not how we judge our neighbors, and our welcome mat is an invitation to all. It is my opinion the Boulder Police Department needs to engage in racial sensitivity training, along with training in how to de-escalate situations before they devolve into weapons-drawn style responses. The responding officer needs to undergo counseling to determine if there was a bias problem in his future with the department, determined by that outcome. An apology from Chief Testa is necessary to both the harassed student and the community at large. Many in our community recognize the need for so-called white privilege and how this situation would never have occurred had the student been white. Comments about how to respond to police officers in forums like the Daily Camera clearly indicate that many do not understand how a lifetime of discrimination can impact how a person would respond to an overly aggressive police intrusion. A community discussion geared towards an effort to understand how these racial attitudes perpetuate stereotypes and how we can overcome those negative perceptions might be a path towards a better Boulder. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Zuckerman.
Hello, my name is Amy Zuckerman, and I was chair of the Human Relations Commission in 2015 when an incident prompted City Council to hire Hillard Heinz to review police data in the PSRP. Well, here we are 4 years later with an outraged community, and I think we should admit failure. I have 4 recommendations. Number 1, courageous and accountable leadership to complete the job. $100,000 of our money went to good consultants, but their 12 recommendations were only partially addressed. We need people in leadership jobs who are willing and able to do what must be done as recommended. Number 2, the HRC should hold the PSRP accountable. In 2015, the city manager was quick to remove HRC involvement with the consultation process. The HRC was instead given a nebulous goal of fostering a, quote, safe and welcoming community, but that is an outcome and not a cause. What does cause a safe community is people living free of biased police behavior. The HRC could provide valuable PSRP input and oversight as the PSRP hears community complaints, reviews investigations into those complaints, and makes community recommendations to leaders in the police department. Number 3, it's time for a 100% citizen review board. Moving the PSRP under the city manager in 2016 was a good first step, but we have to protect the objectivity of community members on it. The ACLU and others have critiqued split boards for a long time. And number 4, de-escalation policy and training needs to be a priority. In 2016, Chief Testa told council that de-escalation training was held, that staff was exploring new ways to enhance bias-free policing. Did the officers on March 1st pass that training? This community deserves officers who are skilled in this. Let's not have this citizen's experience be in vain. The time for serious, lasting, structural change is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Michael Franklin.
Hi, my name is Michael Franklin. I'm a professor at Naropa University for 22 years. And over those years, I've had many students of color in my classroom. I can't tell you how many office hours have been devoted to talking with them while they wept and while they were feeling the need to escape and even leave our program because of the heinous experiences they had in our community. What I fear one of the outcomes from this situation is similar to what Chuck Leaf said earlier, and that is, you have harmed my capacity to recruit students of color to my program. Something that I work very hard to do, but they will see what happened. And in fact, this year before this incident, we had our admissions interviews, and a Navajo woman who really wants to come and study with me and be in our program said, I'm not sure I can come because I'm not sure what it will be like for me to be in this community. The word is out about this community. This just makes it even more pronounced. When I looked at the video of what happened, I was shocked at how stuck the moment was. I mean, that was what I'm watching for, I don't know, was it 12, 15 minutes, and it was just stuck. It was solid. It was rigid. Where was that moment of training where somebody looked at this gentleman and said, this is ridiculous. This moment does not deserve how it's being met. Can we just back off and maybe reset for a second and apologize in the moment? Okay, I'm buzzed.
Thank you very much. Evan Ravitz.
Evan Ravitz, Table Mesa. I've lived here over 40 years. The city of Boulder has built a reputation as very punishing to young people, artists, and hippies, not to mention people of color and the homeless. It goes back to our founding. We took all the Arapaho land, breaking that treaty. Boulder was established with building lots costing $1,000 compared to $100 in Denver to make it an exclusive place. Black people lived on Goss Grove and especially on Water Street, now known as Canyon, which regularly flooded. In the 30s, Boulder had one of 3 Colorado Ku Klux Klan caverns. Boulder's a bastion of the military-industrial complex with all the major defense firms along the Front Range and all the right-wing repressive politics that brings. It's just well hidden in genteel Boulder. There's a reason someone risked arrest or death a few years ago by repainting the sign on the Justice Center to read Injustice Center. Now I've lost my place. There's a reason why thousands of students rioted for 2 nights in 1997 on the Hill, doing $500,000 damage. One reason the student president testified was the perception that students had no rights, while the police had given the parents of John Benet Ramsey every opportunity to escape justice. I'll skip down here. That 2-level justice system worked right here for 2 city council people, Richard Polk and George Karakian. Then DA Stan Garnett appeared to help. Zaid is right. Stan Garnett is eminently unqualified to lead this investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. Adam Swetlick.
Good evening. Tonight, I wanted to speak about my personal experience surrounding race issues here in Boulder. During my hundreds of nights working in the service industry, I had thousands of positive experiences. The best part of all was the service industry staff that I got to work with. We would often joke that our staff was the most racially diverse cross-section of Boulder that Boulder had to offer, and it was actually a truth. It wasn't really a joke at all. But with this diversity often came some of our worst experiences. Both verbal and physical attacks of racially charged nature happened every few weeks to my friends of color. I was always astounded at how well they managed these attacks. They would be angry, of course, but always in control. To them, it was just a part of life, one I hadn't been exposed to until regularly working with them. What astounded me most was the frequency and nonchalant attitudes of the attackers, something I didn't realize would exist in Boulder until I was in it. Unfortunately, most of my service industry friends only commute to Boulder to work, so you won't ever hear from any of them. I just thought it would be worth saying for them that issues of race are far from solved here, especially in little-seen areas like the late-night service industry. As for my interactions with Boulder PD, I never witnessed a scenario like the one that brought us all together tonight, despite dozens of interactions with them. I base this lack of negative experiences on a strong sense of community that the downtown service industry has fostered. Police, employees, and patrons were always watching each other and holding each other accountable for their actions. This led to mostly positive interactions during even the most tense of encounters. I ask tonight that we strive for the same accountability and oversight throughout the entire community, not just our downtown service community. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Rob Smoke.
My name is Rob Smoke. I live in Boulder. I've lived in Boulder like 32 and a half years. And I would venture to guess that I've spoken at city council meetings more than any of the council members who are in this room over a lifetime, not in recent times. First of all, telling somebody who isn't holding a weapon to put down their weapon is a terror tactic. It's not police work, and it doesn't take a lot of research to find that out. You can actually see video of people being shot immediately after that line has been spoken by a cop. I have to just share momentarily about my own experience. I was brutally assaulted by someone who was white, 26 years old, much bigger than me, a drug dealer on the Hill. And the arresting officer said things in court to make sure this guy was acquitted. And he wrote a statement in advance of that, which would acquit that guy. And it said, it had contained things in that statement that he said I said, which I never said to him. So I asked for the body camera of that. And I asked for the dispatch tape of the time I was with him in his car. I was in his car the entire time I was with him. And neither of those things were produced. And only 7.5 months later did Greg Testa, the chief of police, say, There was no body camera. And I believe it was a cover-up. And I asked only the city attorney. I asked council and the city attorney, but I directed it to the city attorney. Can I submit my complaint to the professional standards review unit or whatever it is you have? And I was told by City Attorney Tom Carr that my complaint was baseless, primarily because he knew Greg Testa personally. And Greg Testa would not allow lying by members of his force. I don't have any concealed weapon on me, but I have a finger I can point. There's at least 3 people here,
Hey, Rob.
Deputy Chief, Chief of Police,
Rob.
City Attorney, who do not belong involved in this investigation in any way, shape, or form.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay? Thank you.
Stephen McMillan. Steve here. Lynn Siegel. I guess Lynn's coming up. Sheila Davis. Okay. Well, it's not like she'll lose her place. Are you Steve?
Stephen.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hi, I'm Stephen McMillian. I'm glad you're still here with us. I'm glad that there was a video on you. Your incident brings up May 2012 for me. I took my own case to court, was found not guilty, and they found excessive use of force was used by the Boulder Police Department. I'll tell you why 8 was there. It's 8 for restraint. There's 1 on each arm, 1 controlling the head. The 6th one's yelling out, quit resisting, to let everybody know that excessive use of force isn't being used. The 7th one is there watching the 6 back and crowd control. And the 8th is next to comms in case additional resources or medical needs to roll to that incident. City committee wants you to think this is about race, but the people here that are unhoused face this every day as well. I'm talking about the homeless here in Boulder. Now, Mama told me that home is where your heart is, so as long as you have a beaten one, you always have a home. But homeless here in Boulder face this brutality along with our minorities as well. And I just wanted to expose that. Now, tactically, I can talk about the Boulder Police Department as well because this was brought up in my trial. They're allowed to use what they call softening the suspect. They're allowed to drop elbows. They're allowed to knee. If you Google cops in Boulder on YouTube, that incident happened not even 50 feet from here across the creek. That juvenile man was contacted for smoking a cigarette. He's repeatedly kneed and elbowed because he won't give up his hands because he didn't feel that smoking a cigarette was outlawed. But here in Boulder, it is. That's what I got for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Lynn?
Perfect segue. Lynn Siegel, Mountain Heights. My concern here is that in 2013, on New Year's Day, someone in the police department killed an elk, and 2 guys were implicated in it, and I don't see where things have improved now. We've got 8 folks involved this time. So I think we're going downhill. I don't like the sentencing that happened for Sam Carter and Brent Curnow, the 2 that collaborated on the elk. And they used each other to get the sentence reduced. And I'm afraid we're going to have some serious stuff coming down here. This is sentencing issues. What happened with Sam was he got 1 year. Stan Garnett recommended 1 year when he could have given him up to 6. I thought he should get life without parole because these guys have violated the human trust, and they are in a position of trust in Boulder, and that trust is eroded, and it's gone downhill since 2013. And this is very concerning. Prison was not meaningful, but symbolic, Judge Butler said. Butler also said he was not interested in symbolic gestures, but the benefit to the community, so the guy got community service. Well, I'd like to know, what is the real benefit to the community? The real benefit to the community is how you treat these 8 people that pulled this off, because they are a message to the future and to what goes on here in Boulder. That's what's beneficial to the community, not community service.
Thank you, Lynn. Sheila Davis. And then Bill Spain.
Good evening. My name is Sheila Davis, and I'm a physician, professor, health equity researcher, and a member of the Boulder branch of the NAACP. The shooting of unarmed black men at the hands of police has risen to the level of a public health crisis in this nation. On my drive to this meeting, NPR was reporting on yet another white police officer on trial for killing an unarmed black teen in Pittsburgh. Fortunately, the episode at Naropa on March 1st did not escalate to a shooting. However, for the Boulder community to serve as a model for the nation with respect to inclusivity, I propose the following measures. Last Saturday, I had the privilege of engaging in a dialogue with youth of color and members of the Denver, Seattle, and New Orleans police departments. In this conversation, youth described their encounters with police, and police discussed what their average days were like. The officers had an opportunity to appreciate the dire circumstances of some of these youth. In these vulnerable spaces, authentic relationships emerge. This event was part of the Denver Police Department's Bridging the Gap Children and Cops program. Through this program, I facilitate dialogues between youth and police officers. And you know something? Dialogue really works. As a public health researcher, I am all about prevention. To that end, I would love to see Bridging the Gap launched here in Boulder along with the Independent Community Oversight Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Bill Spain, and then Nishama Abraham.
My name is Bill Spain, and I live in Boulder. I've been here for 6 years. I came from Ohio, worked in a city called Newark, Ohio. That was at the end of my retirement from another company, and I worked for the city for about 3.5 years. I was human resources director there, and I was in charge of the police, the fire department, and also code administration. One of the topics that I've heard tonight is about the communication between the public and also the police department. First of all, I will say something about the police department that I'm familiar with because they worked with me for about 3.5 years when I was there in Newark, Ohio. Some situations are very frightening. I've gone on runs with them, and there are some situations in which they have been taken a pot shot at, and that is not very comfortable for anybody. On the other hand, there were some serious communication problems between the public and between the police department. So what we did was we set up a program in which we would have sort of a community buddy-buddy system where we would have certain officers, they would be in certain parts of the city. But their job was not just to go out there and look around. Their job was to get out the car, go and engage in some conversations, get to know the people in the community. And after that, they would establish some sort of camaraderie, some sort of, well, they do care about us. The other thing is what it established was that we had this camaraderie over a period of time between the police and the community. And I tell you one thing right now, that worked. That worked so well that we just didn't hardly have any more problems, at least with the communities that we work with. So that's something that I would suggest to the city of Boulder and to the police chief, Chief Tester. And I think you might find that very, very interesting. I'm sorry, Mr. Atkinson, about what happened to you. And I know that it must have been devastating. Hopefully we can get it all resolved for you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nishama, and you're pulling with two people out there. Can they raise their hands? Great. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. My name is Nishama Abraham, and I've lived in Boulder for 22 years. I'm a mother, 2 daughters. I fought fracking for years here. I'm an environmental activist. I have a very strong place in my heart for justice and love. And I'm also a member of the community engagement panel, which the city of Boulder, I was appointed by the city manager and the police department chief, Greg Testa. I've served on this panel for 2 years, and we've met every 2 months. And I want to share my experience because my perception is that the police department is excellent. It's thorough, it's thoughtful, it's process-oriented, it's careful, it's dedicated and devoted to protecting the welfare of the community. There's something called, in this capacity, I participated in what's called the Citizens of Police Academy, which is open to everyone. It's free, and it lets you see the inner workings of the police department. One of the things that I did was I got to do a ride-along, and that completely changed my perception of police officers. I was with Officer Torres when a woman had used mace to spray people near the Safeway parking lot. And I was with the officer, and we went to the scene, and the woman sprayed him with pepper spray in his eyes, and he was blind at that moment. And I stood with him, and she ran away, and I knew that if she'd come back, I would have done everything I could to have protected that officer. Because I got to see what it's like if you go out every day on patrol and you have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, you put your life on the line. I've also gotten to spend months with Chief Testa, and I mean, I'm going to consider myself a pretty good judge of character, and he is a good man. He is thoughtful. He is open to ideas. He has shared with us that, I'm going to name now some specific actions that we have asked of Police Chief Testa, and also things that I've heard from the community. And I think that they're going to be listened to. So one is that we have, that the police department has another round of implicit bias training, and that the community suggests some of those trainers and the organizations. And my compliments to District Attorney Dougherty, because I understand that you've gotten a grant for implicit bias training, and that's great. And I think to share who you pick as another choice would be really helpful. The idea of de-escalation training is definitely needed. In Richmond, California, the police department created its own program, and from 2007 to 2014, there was not one use of lethal force, and that was implicit. It was called force option training. So that's something that we could benefit from, another police department that's really been successful. The idea, I am in favor of a community oversight board. I mean, I think that, there are dozens of them in the United States. The ones that we could look at would be Berkeley, California, Flint, Michigan, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and San Francisco. These are all in something called the National Institute of Justice report, and they use a type of oversight where the board has, it's civilian-based, there's racial and all kinds of diversity. There's real authority that that panel has. It can subpoena, for example, witnesses. It needs staff support. Am I at 4? Oh my gosh. Well, I advocate that we act with love and see each person as a human being. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisham. Sally Ann Campbell, and then Matthew Ray.
Hello. I'm a PhD chemist, but I'm a master's degree in applied behavioral science. And I'm changing the subject because I've had an experience, I think, different from most of you. I grew up in an integrated community. With my family, when somebody talked about the bad guys, it was the silly white people in the trailers. And then I went to college, and then I got chosen as a great compliment. I was chosen to help open a college in Washington, D.C. for black people, black kids. And there was no entrance exam. It was all by lottery. And I was part of a very excellent group of people who were chosen to do this, worldwide known psychologists and sociologists and chemists and engineers, and we took our students where they were and gave them remedial whatever they needed, and most of them went to graduate school. And I felt very proud that we were able to do that with our students. However, they asked me to do a day of discussions on Earth Day, you may remember years ago. And I gave a discussion on lead poisoning in the inner city because we were living in Washington, D.C., you know, it was lead poisoning city. Well, some students came up to me after, it was 95% black, I think I mentioned that. So students came up to me afterwards and said, there are kids dying of lead poisoning down the street. And I said, we got to do something about that. And I got some other chemistry people, teachers, to work with me. And we got black high school students to go into the slums, pick up paint samples and bring them back for testing for lead. And then we got the kids who were exposed, tested and treated. And what I didn't know until after the whole program was done and the city took it over because it was so successful, what I didn't know is that it had been successful because the Black Panthers were behind it.
Ma'am, you're out of time.
I know.
Okay. Thank you. Matthew Ray, and then Darren O'Connor.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Matthew Ray. I would like to thank... thank you. Thank you for providing us all with this opportunity to share our experiences with you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a student at the University of Colorado at Boulder. I'm a freshman. I'm 19 years old. I grew up in Broomfield. Nice place. Growing up, I always heard that racism was over. You know, same way the climate's doing fine and our schools are safe. It didn't take long for the bubble to pop on that one, and I wanted to be the sort of person to take action. A concrete goal I can provide you all with is that from my research, despite only being 1% to 2% of the city population, Black and African American residents of Boulder make up about 12% of its arrests. I find that to be an undue overrepresentation, and that should decrease. The data sourced in 2016, as has been mentioned, it's kind of hard to track down. A lot has come up about what sort of people we are. You've all presented yourselves as nice people, and I'll say I believe that, and I will take you at that. And a difficult thing sociologically is that despite that, we all still participate in systems that are harming people, and the responsibility still falls to us to amend those systems and those harms. So, I'll believe that you all want to do the right thing. A good place to start is making efforts to decrease asymmetric police response. Talk to people about this. This is real. It's not over. It's not just memes. You know what I mean by that.
Thank you, Matthew. Darren O'Connor.
Darren O'Connor, I have a lot to say, but I'm going to keep it short tonight and hold up my sign that says community designed, community oversight. Our message shall not be muted. This is in reference to the fact that we don't want our city manager to design community oversight. We want community to design community oversight. Thank you. Not as silent as I expected.
Thank you, Darren. Maria, and then Anna Wood.
My name is Maria Richmond. NAACP Boulder branch members, of which I am one, demand an independent community oversight board with broad investigatory powers and binding rulings. No more shall our voices be heard, but our message muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So I have a message for the folks downstairs. I know this won't be popular, but we're all being quiet up here in order to preserve a safe space for everybody to speak their mind, and we would ask you do that downstairs because it's disrupting us up here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna Wood, and I am the regional...
Can you shut the doors?
Hello, my name is Anna Wood, and I am the regional organizing manager at New Era, Colorado, a local nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to mobilize and empower a new generation to participate in our democracy and make Colorado a better place for everyone. We've worked here in Boulder for 13 years, engaging at City Council and at the ballot box. I'm here on behalf of New Era to voice our strong support for swift, tangible action to advance racial equity in our city. We are long past the time for action and long past the breaking point. The city of Boulder prides itself on norm-breaking, progressive culture. We take the lead on bold climate change policy and became a sanctuary city. But underlying all of this, we lack diversity, inclusion, and anti-racist infrastructure and action. More than that, our community lacks a firm commitment to addressing and dismantling white supremacy and advancing equity. In light of our community's activism and leadership, our lack of progress on these issues, New Era's progress included, is shameful. We are grateful for the leadership from Boulder's NAACP chapter, Black Lives Matter 5280, and Showing Up for Racial Justice. We fully support the imperatives for action that the Boulder NAACP outlined and commit to supporting them to ensure these imperatives are implemented. New Era focuses on training, uplifting, and advocating for young people. Our generation was raised, taught, and governed by an older generation who dismisses institutionalized racism. We have witnessed systemic racism in the criminal justice system, the school-to-prison pipeline, and our economic policies, youth of color being the most impacted by all of these. If we want to make a safe and healthy future for everyone in Boulder, we must start taking real action against these oppressive systems. Millennials and Gen Z are the largest, most progressive, and most diverse generations in history, and will no longer ignore perpetual racism and white supremacy. This meeting is a good start, but can't only be an annual conversation about the progress we have not made as organizations, as community members, and as the city itself. New Era is committed to the continuous work this year and into future years as well. Thank you for all being here tonight and for engaging in this incredibly crucial conversation. I look forward to seeing some tangible action. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Rich Larson? Is Rich here? How about Madeline Woodley? Okay. Welcome, Madeline.
Good evening to you all. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity. My name is Madeline Strong Woodley, and I represent the NAACP Boulder branch. NAACP Boulder branch members demand an independent community oversight board with broad investigatory powers and binding rulings. No more shall our voices be heard, but our message muted. I'd like to ask to leave you with two things. One, if you would look up the name Ron Settles and just read about Ron Settles, and I think it will provide insight for everyone, particularly my family, our family. And the other thing is the Community Review Board, Citizens Review Board, of which I am from Memphis, Tennessee, and worked with the police department there in creating a Citizens Review Board that to this day is in effect and has decreased the crime rate significantly, and it has bridged gaps between the police departments and the community. Thank you again for having me. Good evening.
Thank you, Madeline. Glenda Robinson, and then Judy Huston.
Thank you very much. End racism, justice now. We're back here. We gotta have more. We gotta have conversations, but we gotta have action, and it takes the actions of everybody here. Thank you guys for all being here, being concerned. Thank you for your participation, and we expect results. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy? And then Anna Seeger.
Hi, I'm Judy Houston. I was born in Boulder in 1951. I now live in Longmont, but I watch what's going on in Boulder with great interest. When I was about, I think it was probably 16, I met the Denver president of the Black Panthers, who, when I told him that we were all working together to make racism go away, he said, "Little miss, we don't have time." This was 50 years ago in Boulder, and he lived in Denver at that time. His son is now, his family is active in the anti-racism community in Denver. I am with the NAACP and also Boulder Surge. I'm very privileged to serve as vice president to Annette, who spoke earlier. The NAACP Boulder branch members demand an independent community oversight board with broad investigatory powers and binding rulings. No more shall our voices be heard, but our message be muted. We really are trying to hold this community to action. It is time. It is past time. It is 50 years past time. It is 100 years past time. It is 500 years past time. Let's get on it.
Thank you, Judy. Anna?
Hello, my name is Anna Seeger. I'm here to speak for my husband who couldn't come tonight because the incident that he experienced was too traumatic. My husband is from El Salvador. He's a dark-skinned male. 4 years ago, he was driving, well, before that, a white male driving a white pickup truck, pulled out a gun and brandished the gun at someone else in the street a couple miles away. And as a result, my husband, driving with our 2 kids in the backseat of his truck, was pulled over at gunpoint by the Boulder Police Department. They made him get out of the truck. They put him down on his knees on the side of the 28th Street with a couple cops all pointing their guns at the back of his head. While our kids were in the truck, they yelled at him, "Where's your weapon?" They went around to the front of the truck. They trained their guns on my kids. And then they realized that they had made a huge mistake. But they sat there, and he sat at the side of the street on his knees with the guns trained at the back of his head. And no one said, "We've made a mistake." They talked on their radios, and it went on while he was sitting there on his knees. And then eventually they said, "You can go." And I'm just really saddened that we're here 4 years later. It's happened to another male. None of the police officers, the 8 police officers that were there, none of them said, "Hey, maybe this isn't what we should be doing. Let's stop." And I'd really like to see Boulder take some action to make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Mason.
I'm here tonight as a mother of 2 biracial children in this town. I've been here for 24 years, and my son's here tonight. And I know that most parents are concerned when their kids are just kids and they go out into the community and they wonder what kind of trouble they're getting into. I wonder if mine's coming back alive. That's what I wonder about. I sit at home and I wonder, is tonight the night that he wanders into a neighborhood where neighbors don't come out and ask questions, they just call the cops? I wonder whether or not his hood is up. He showed up tonight with his hoodie, and I said, tonight is probably the one night you're safest to wear your hood here in this community. I think about that all the time. I think about whether or not I'll see my son when he leaves the house. I wonder if this was your child, if he was your child, if you would describe it as a concerning event. I wonder if your response and lack of response would have been the same. We missed an incredible opportunity. And I'm not saying that you condemn the police or you don't do an investigation, but just like Mayor Pete did in South Bend, he said in his letter that one sentence that stuck out to me is that we can't stand for this. You are loved, but also that you are needed. You missed the opportunity to value individuals of color in our neighborhood, to show up, to say something. You didn't have to condemn the police, to just say something and to say it's a zero tolerance. You didn't do that. And you failed epically because of that. You approved this by not, to me it's complicit behavior, by not saying anything. Now, zero tolerance.
Thank you, Mason. Excuse me. Janet Heimer. And you're pooling with 2 people? Are they here?
It turns out that the people I was going to pool with they already had somebody. So,
okay.
Do we need 2 people? I'm very quick.
All right.
I'm Janet Heimer. I have lived here for 50 years. And in all of those years, I would like to say that Boulder has never been what it thinks it is. As a white person, we cannot judge what people of color are experiencing here. And we can't pretend that we know that the police are behaving a certain way because they treat us a certain way. I just want to say that unlearning racism is a lifelong process. I'm 71 years old. I continue to learn every single day. And we have to admit that we are racist. You cannot grow up white in this country and not be racist. It's a hard pill to swallow, but we have to swallow it. I think that we have talked and listened enough in the city of Boulder, in Boulder County. We really do have to have action. We have to make a change. It has to be now. And I think the review board sounds like at least one step in the direction that needs to be taken, and it needs to be independent. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Janet. Susan Andre. Is that Susan? And after Susan Andre, if Sammy Lawrence could be ready.
Hello, I'm Susan Andre. I've been a resident of Boulder for more than 30 years. I was once pulled over by a police officer when I was driving at the correct speed down 9th Street, turning right on Spruce, something I did once or twice a day to go home. And the police officer came up to me with his hand on his gun. That was the first and last time that happened to me, and I have to wonder if it was because my stepson with his dreadlocks was sitting next to me in the car. I think it doesn't happen to the rest of us, and we don't appreciate it. I understand that police officers put themselves in harm's way for the benefit of the society, and they have many times a day probably to feel very afraid. But I do think that human beings, when they act out of fear, can be very dangerous. And I'd like to raise the question, who should be carrying an armed weapon in the name of the residents of Boulder? Maybe not all the police officers are really up to that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Sammy, is Sammy Lawrence here? He's downstairs. Well, there he is. Excellent. After Sammy, we'll have Laura Gonzalez.
I want to take a moment in time and say thank you for being alive. It's good to see your face. Heck yeah, it's good to see you in person. I want to say next, thank you everybody for being here today. For those of you who were at the march, thank you as well. Michael Donnelly especially, thank you. If I remember correctly, if I'm pointing to the right one now, I have my glasses on, contacts, but I remembered you were here. I wanted to tell you thank you personally. You know what, for the reason why. That being said as well, my grandfather was a sheriff for Stockton, California for about 20 years. I know I've talked about that before. So with the works of him actually also serving in the military and being a Purple Heart veteran, there are a lot of traumas that have come from his legacy and his servitude to me, as a matter of fact. And I find an interest to how, as was mentioned earlier today, that we have biases that we must address in this community. As a white, black, and Native American man, I have had to face my own biases in order to make sure I am able to be in this community, especially as a man with a brain injury. Trust me, life's not fun sometimes, okay? So that being said as well, we must be accountable. There was a bias that was in place on that day of the incident that is greater than racism. It takes more to look at the picture for us to be bolder in order for this to actually come to face, for us to grow even greater as a community. The bias of racism is prevalent in this community with officers, but there are also officers who do good work. There are few that I can count on my hand, and it's not because they've served me, because I asked for assistance. It's because of the fact they're human beings underneath that badge. I implore to all of you human beings underneath this badge to remember your hearts. Remember, you are human, just like all of us. We need you as much as you need us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Laura, and then Jamal Gamor.
The racial achievement gap in Boulder Valley and St. Vrain ISDs. The unethical way we take students of color money at CU while we refuse to support them to succeed. The lack of representation right in this room in the sitting council in positions of power. The broken promise of Boulder PD to continue to provide information to ICE. The refusal to accept our recent history of colonization, of murders of indigenous peoples, of sacking black businesses, of not taking responsibility to provide health education to those that we take taxes from and don't have a right to any benefits. Health should be a human right. The privilege to dismiss other cultures others than white. The city of Boulder can afford to make reparations and to close the racial gap in many areas. Have you been listening? Sorry, just realized that. My bad. The March 1st incident is not a bias. It's another act of racism. Please recognize it as so and stop sugarcoating racism. I am tired of intention. I am tired of being told to presume the positive and good intention of others, especially of those with power and privilege. You know who you are. I am tired of being told to not be emotional or angry when I talk about race. How dare you ask me to separate emotion from race when that is something that has been and continues to haunt me and many black and indigenous people for over 500 years. I will ask you to really listen right now, and I will tell you of some potential solutions that have been asked for decades by other community members that came before me. Stop delaying reparations. Make sure you provide landmarks to every single massacre that was done in this state to the Cheyenne and Arapaho people, to Los Seis of Boulder, to those Chicano ex and those Mexican Americans we deported due to their skin color when they were Americans, to recognize the real colonizing history of this country and this city, to teach it in K-12 systems so we make sure it's not repeated again, to close the racial achievement gaps by having courageous conversations about race in all agencies and here as well, to provide full city scholarships to first-generation Boulder citizens, to go to an affluent and white university as means to level the field that we like to say we're proud of, to request your police officers to have basic education, such as maybe an associate degree in criminal law and policies, to have knowledge about the communities, to engage with them, and to de-escalate situations. Give them a history lesson. Give them some intercultural communication training and intersectionality training, and do not stop there. Continue to educate them and provide them the tools to be able to be nonviolent and stop this violent white dominant culture. Provide potable water to all and to all the racial oppressions that 2 minutes don't allow me to talk about. Let's provide good quality education to all people, including people of color, to run for office. I really would like to stop saying I'm the first of that, the first black of this, the first indigenous of this. As a woman of color in the sciences with Mayan indigenous roots, I know I am not the first. I and many of us people of colors, we come from a long line of astronomers, engineers, governors, educators, mathematicians. Math that was far more accurate than our current Gregorian calendar. We've just been forced to forget, and I ask you to remember.
Thank you. Jamal.
Hello, sorry. My name is Jamal Gilmore. Let me rattle it all off real quick. Started college at 15, went to the Navy, served 6 tours in Iraq, came here to Boulder, been here 19 years. In that 19 years, I worked for various organizations, Cajun U being one of them. I'm on the hip-hop show, the hip-hop show in the evening from 7 to 10, and then from 7 to 9 in the morning, I'm on the Gospel Chime, and I'm jamming Jesus with Jamal, where I'm at. My thing with Boulder and this place is, I'm offended by you. I've been here long enough to say that to you. I'm strong enough to say that to you. I'm a business owner. I own property. I did everything you've asked of me, and you gave me nothing. And how I know you gave me nothing? My kid goes to your school. In his school for Black History Month in the kindergarten. The teacher, who's a white teacher, she got up, she gave kids 3 pieces of paper. They're supposed to write their greatest attribute on that piece of paper and then bring them in. She proceeded to link it as a chain around the room to say, that is my culture? You teaching my black kid that is his culture. That is him. He is a slave. So all those white kids in that room, he is one of 20. He was the only kid of color in that room. So supremacy is what you taught my kid. You taught him supremacy. I didn't ask you to do that. I asked you to educate him. And you educate those white kids in that room about supremacy. He's not beneath them. And to this day, he's in 2nd grade. And now he's worried. Kids tease him all the time, call him dumb, call him all this stuff. But come see him in his court. Come see him where he strives and be this. I'm sorry if I get offensive and crazy, but like you, sir, I got 7 seconds. You are the young Mike Jones. I don't know if you know Mike Jones, but Mike Jones went to Naropa. Mike Jones is kicked off of Pearl Street because he's been through you for like a long time. He's like 50 years now, over 50. And so like Mike Jones is the old you, brother. I'm with you, man. I am with you, brother. Like I promise you, I will be here. I've been here. I don't prophetize my stuff, but I'm here for you, brother. And I see it happening. You kicked Mike Jones off of Pearl Street because he's talking about the issues of this man. He's talking about the issues of my son. He's talking the issues of every person of color, woman that you overlooked for years. And it's my fault because I sat here for 19 years and watched you do it and profited off of it. And I apologize to you, brother, and every other person of color here. I will no longer do that. From right now, from ever. I am going to be here to help you, my brother. I'm going to be here to help all brothers and my white brothers, my white sisters. It doesn't stop with color. Because in the Navy, I was over there. You talk about people, he's scared to come to a car. Think about you in the middle of a country that everybody hates you. Not just because you're black, but because you're an American and you fight for Bush and all this other crazy stuff I can't even imagine about right now. But then I come here and I get the same thing. When I come into a space, if you greet me, if you look at me, I say hello to you. Ask anybody that saw me today. As soon as I see you, I say hello. When you see me, you don't say nothing. You say nothing. You don't even look at me. You do this thing me and my peoples call the look, no look. Because you look at me to recognize I'm black, then you stare your face at the ground until you pass me. And then once you pass me, you pick your head up proudly. How do I know? Because I turn around, not to look at your booty. I know you think I'm doing that, but that ain't it. I turn around to see your reaction so I can teach my son how to live in this world. Me and my wife had an argument, as we do every morning, about how strict I am with my son. I'm sorry I'm taking too long, but like, I teach him to be perfect, better than perfect. Better than perfect. Your white kids can come up here and be crazy, do whatever the hell they want to do, just shoot people, kill people, but you profile me. Landowner, business owner, fought for my country, fight for you, my brother and my sisters. And you look at me as I'm the bad person. I live across the street from Effa. I live in low-income housing. You know what? My stuff is worse than anybody else's I've ever seen. If I wasn't a handyman, if I didn't know how to do my own stuff, I had to rebuild my own house. I put in a new countertop, new doorways. I don't even have electricity on the outside of the building, which is code. And I bought it in 2007, and that was in code in 2004. So like, I'm out of code in 2019. This is how you treat poor people, and I'm poor, and I get it. You don't want to look at me. You want to have this conversation, but then do something. You teach white supremacy. You teach supremacy. Period. You teach how to fail as a black man. You don't teach how to strive as a white person. You bulldoze every hurdle that white kids have in their way, and you put up more hurdles for the black kids. And we started off the race late. Now, I live here by choice. I am from Brooklyn, New York. My family has owned their home since 1908. I'm here to support you, my brother. I'm saying I'm here by choice. And I've been here learning how the white society here treats their people of color. And I'm really sorry, I'm taking my time from you, but I think what we're not talking about here is the systemic issue that you overlook. It's like you don't put any resources into doing this because it's only 11%. You don't put anything into anything because it's not worth it. The voices aren't many. I know of 3 black people from the city right now. Renata not being the only one. There was a woman before her. There was a man from transportation after her. Ask about these people. Why can't they be here to talk for themselves? Why is it? Because you shovel it under the rug, racism doesn't matter, and it's horrible. And Penfield Tate was the first mayor, but he was kicked out because he was bringing up uncomfortable situations like the LGBTQ, sorry, I don't know the acronym, but the queer community, the gay community in town. He bring up issues about that, and so they got rid of him. He didn't step down, they got rid of him. And so you have to talk about that. Educate your people like they said before me. Like really take a dive deep into this, because I'm gonna be here. I promise you I'm gonna be here. And with God willing, we all will be here. And next time, man, when I watch that video, my only advice to you, don't turn your back on them. Keep your eyes focused. Like it happened to me. There was 17 cops in front of me, right here on Pearl Street as I was a business owner. So keep your eyes focused on them. Don't turn your back, man, because you turning is a flash, and the flash will get you a flash. Love you all. Peace in your journey. And I do respect court, and I do respect time. I'm very sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Louise. And after Louise, we have Laura Dellon. We have about, just so people know where we are, we're at 36, and we have 47 people signed up.
Hi, I'm Louise. I've been in Boulder about 8 years after I retired. Before then, I was in civil rights enforcement in another state. And first, I'd like to just say amen to practically everything I've heard tonight. It seems to me the particular situation we're talking about was not a failure. It was one failure after another. There were so many points at which a different decision could be made. First, a police officer sees a man picking up trash. How many trespassers come to property and pick up trash? I wish they'd come around my place. Decides to question him, and he shows his ID and explains why he's there. So far, so good. Thank you, sir. Sorry to bother you. Have a nice day. Leave. No. Call for backup. It's not just that other police showed up. Somebody dispatched them. Somebody made a decision to send other police there. How many and who? Another chance to not make a mistake. But they made one. And ultimately, a third party came in and said, hey, this guy really belongs here. And finally, the police leave. It shouldn't take a third party. A person is picking up trash. Come on, folks. There's been a lot of talk about an independent community board, and I support that. That's primarily an afterward thing, and I think we need a lot of prevention. And I'm sorry, my time is up.
Thank you, Louise. Laura? Is Laura Dellon here? Or Dellon? Okay. Maria Murillo? And then David Prowell.
Good evening, everybody, and I appreciate that you're putting this time for us to speak. Wasn't sure about coming because sometimes I feel this is just deaf ears, so I hope it's not this time. I'm a Latina, and I have lived in this town for about 20 years or over 20 years with my 2 Latino kids. And yes, this is not an isolated incident. I have had my own share, all my children have, because I look white, so I go easy. Nobody kind of notices me, but my kids are not as white as me, and yes, they have had their share. My boy, especially, I think it's harder for the boys, male of color. And he used to be stopped a lot when he bought his first car that he couldn't afford anything fancy. And he was stopped a lot for no reason. And then once they found he was clean, it's like, oh, well, you turned too soon, or you put the light too late, or you did it. So it was just these silly reasons. I finally was able to afford it and gave him my car. And then since got a little better because my car looked a little better, so then he didn't look as Latino for some people. And so these things do happen all the time, and you could see the cry from the community. We are hurting a lot. This is not one isolated incident, it's just deepening in the wound that we already have, and it's daily. And what happened, my children are now adults, graduated from CU, and they're exploring other horizons. They moved to exploring and finding options in another continent because they want to be in a place where they could feel welcome and integrated, which even though they spend 20 years of their life or more here, that still don't feel like home. And that's very sad, because I went in here, but I understand their point. And I work in education, and yes, we had heard a lot about data. Please provide the data, create the data, look at the data. We are asked every day to look at the data in education and see where children are failing, where is the gap, what can we do to make it better. So the data speaks. Just feeling like we're trying, it's just talking. Look at the data so you could actually put action. Thank you.
Thank you. David Prowl, is David here? Deidre Johnston. And if folks are downstairs, come on up and we'll fill you in. Susie Belmont. Okay. Kirsten Wilson.
David Prowl.
Oh, there's David. Okay.
Hey, thanks, guys. Wow. I'm not going to get up here and get all passionate. I've been watching all you guys. Everybody's listening. We know what we're here about. I'm from Mississippi. Believe me, racism's alive and well. Everybody here is racist, okay? Chief, thank you for coming in and getting in front of this. Council, thank you for sitting here so quietly and non-responsive. It's like you're listening. I appreciate that. You said some marvelous things, sweetheart. Thank you. Thank you for being alive. Thank you for being here. This is a start. This is nothing to be ashamed of. This is happening all across America. All we got to do is man up. We got a good chief. We got a good council. Let's just do it. I'm not going to sit up here and down talk all of y'all or what I've experienced, which I've experienced some things. Been here 50 years. But you shouldn't have had to go through that. The homeless people, let's remember that the homeless people are hassled every single day. There's a bias against them. It's not just racial, not minimizing racial disparity, okay? Not at all. I'm from Mississippi. I'm a good guy. I worked at the penitentiary there. I understand it. There's a lot of hatred going on. It's all about love. It's all we got to do. And it's just as simple as that. And I'm going to just stop. Okay? Thanks, guys.
Thank you, David. Are you one of the people that I called? Which one?
Hi, I've lived in Boulder since
Can you tell us your name?
Sorry, Deidre Johnston. And I lived in Boulder since 1982. And we're a strong intellectual community. And I just want to take a moment, because for me, I'm feeling this here. And I just want us all to take a moment and feel our heart. A year ago, walked out of my house, and there were 6 Boulder policemen with guns on me. And when my husband came out of the house, a man who has taught both of our sons that when you encounter police, you act as politely as possible. You raise your hands, you get low, you look small because you're a big black man, and you have to look small to the police. As he sat on our bench in front and they had guns on me and guns on him, and they said that there had been a call that there was a burglar in our home, an armed burglar. There was no armed burglar in our home, and when I asked to please have us go get our IDs, they said, people lie to us, stay where you are. And they held the gun on me, and I watched them hold the gun on my husband. And I know that there are a list too long to name of unarmed black men who have been shot in this nation. And the fear that came over me to see my husband with a rifle on him, with guns around, with police telling me to be quiet, because I'm just asking you to feel that. That's all I'm asking, is to feel what that really feels like when my two sons leave the house. I fear for their life, and I fear for my husband's life. And as human beings, I just would like you all to feel that in your heart. Thanks.
Thank you. Susie? Yeah.
My name is Susie Belmont. I'm here on behalf of Boulder Showing Up for Racial Justice. And we are tired of all the talking and the leadership that is not leading to action. And what we want to see is action coming from this community, because this community has the answers that we are looking for. Thank you.
Kirsten. And then Neil DiMucci.
Hi, beloved City Council, Greg Testa, Chief Testa, the beloved community of Boulder. So what happened, as was said on March 1st, is unacceptable. But what happened on February 28th and February 27th and February 26th of 2019, 2018, 1987, 1937, 1877, 1859 is also totally unacceptable. This is one incident in a long, an enduring struggle for survival and for justice and equity. And I mean justice in the form of Cornell West, which is a form of public love. My name is Kirsten Wilson. I'm the artistic director of Modus Theater, and we create original theater on community conversation on critical issues to support a stronger and more equitable community. The performance that spawned Modus, Rocks, Karma, Arrows on Boulder history was created in response to a series of race-based hate crimes in 2005 and a series of city council meetings, a lot like this one. I invite you to watch the film, which I handed out, and learn more about Boulder history. We are standing on the ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne, and this room is not full of these Native peoples right now. Their insight, their strength, their knowledge, because of both federal Indian policy and because the founders of Boulder City Town Company and the first mayor and the man who donated most of the land for CU participated in the Sand Creek Massacre. There are also many people of color who are driven out of Boulder in our history, Chinese, Japanese, Latino, African American, and there are many people of color today who are no longer members of this community, as is their insights and offerings because they got tired of not getting the jobs they applied for, having white men pick fights with them at local bars, tired of being followed around stores, tired of hearing the N-word on the street, tired of being told to go back home, tired of feeling profiled by law enforcement, being told that they bring up racism too much at board and commission meetings. There are also many, I believe, in the final words, that if our city was to actually prioritize anti-racism work, bias, and equity, and put this beloved young man's safety, opportunity, and welcome at the center of every conversation that happens in these chambers, that you would gain insight that would not only keep him safe, but you would better understand how to make this the best environmental, business, and education and law enforcement decisions that would create a stronger and healthier community for each person in this room, their employees, students, and their beloved children. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. And thanks for the work that Modus Theater does. Neil, and then Eric Budd.
Hi, I'm Neil, and I'm one of the loudmouths who's clapping and cheering downstairs. And you know, heck yes, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to clap for Zaid, and I'm going to clap for Norma, and I'm going to clap for Darren, and I'm going to clap for Jamal for speaking their truths. So. You know, it was really great to be at the march and to see Aaron Brockett there and Mayor Jones there. Thank you. However, in that public forum, there wasn't a closing of doors. Was there? There was kind of like a listening and an acknowledgement of the uncomfortableness, right? But I didn't really come here to chastise council. I came here to stand in solidarity with NAACP and demanding an independent community oversight board with binding powers of investigation and subpoena power and full transparency and all that good stuff. Boulder really needs it, and it'll be better for it. Putting on another hat, I'm also here to deliver a message for the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. This is from Betty Ball, speaking for the spokes council of the center. And they say, the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center shares the ongoing concerns about a lack of independent oversight of the Boulder Police Department. We agree it is absolutely time for Boulder City Council, along with city administrators, to act on these concerns and in conjunction with the community, develop a model for effective oversight of our police department and that the community can truly trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Eric, and then Rachel Friend.
Hello, Eric Budd. I live in Boulder. I've been in Boulder about 10 years, and something that when I moved here, I never thought about really how white Boulder is, and it was something that I guess when the whole issue of people of color being treated poorly by the police started coming in the news, it struck me really personally because I grew up in St. Louis, and my family was part of the white flight, part of the reason that the struggles in St. Louis that led to all of the challenges in Ferguson and really the start of this national movement is something that I'd always seen all along as I lived there, but at that point it became real to me. And I mention this in the context of Boulder because in a lot of ways, Boulder is also the white flight. We have so much segregated ourselves such that our city is really walled off from the greater community. And that is in very much a similar type of strategy as people who were fleeing the city back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And so I just wanted to give a little of my personal experience and why this is such an important issue to me. And last thing I'll say is I'm also part of the Boulder NAACP, and I support their measures on police oversight. And this is something that will not get better in the community unless we take action. This is something that is systemic at all levels of our community, and we need to continue to make work and progress on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Rachel, and then Bruce Gladstone.
Hi, I'm Rachel Friend. I want to thank you all for holding this meeting tonight and being here and listening. I am a college teacher of criminal justice, and I guess I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of how flawed this system is, and that people of color compared to white people are, for doing the same exact things, more likely to be stopped, arrested, charged, denied favorable pleas, convicted, given longer sentences, and then denied parole. Like at every single step, they are treated worse. And the system dead ends into a dark place. Like solitary confinement is horrific but common. Rape statistics are jarring. Rehabilitation is lacking. Like it goes on and on. So when we profile and stop individuals, if they're lucky enough to survive, we're shoving them onto a path that ends in a dark place. And it's a vicious cycle that all traces back to police officers exercising discretion. Do I expect that Boulder can cure our criminal justice system? Nope, of course not. Nor do I expect that you guys are going to cure climate change. But we fight really hard and out front on climate, and I would ask that we do the same here. The beginning of this system, which is unjust, is policing. That's where the net gets cast, and you all do control that net. So I read on climate change this morning, the level of disruption required to keep us away from catastrophic is incompatible with the status quo. The level of disruption, I think, required to remedy the criminal justice system is likewise incompatible with the status quo. Things like implicit bias training and de-escalation techniques are not going to cut it. Those are Band-Aids that are on the status quo. You guys are going to have to be radical if you want to make the change that we're all asking for. And lastly, as a first step, I support the NAACP's demand for an independent community oversight board. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Bruce? And then Andrea Mengenhall.
Okay, yep, I'm Bruce Gladstone of Boulder. And I like the second or third the idea of a dialogue between all the groups on more of a person-to-person basis between the black groups, the white groups, the police officers. It's a lot easier when people know each other and they actually talk to each other face to face. So I'm calling for the idea of some form of restorative justice, not retribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Andrea, and then Guillermo Estrada Rivera.
Good evening, Andrea Manigal here delivering a statement for the Boulder Chamber, 2440 Pearl Street. And Chamber President John Taylor wanted to be here himself to say this. He thought it was very important. Unfortunately, he got sidelined by the flu, is sick home in bed. I'm not doing so hot myself, but I wanted to be here to say this in person as well. As the community tackles these important issues of social justice and equity, it's important that we're all committed, and the Boulder Chamber is committed to working together, working with the city, working with our local civic civil rights organizations, and to make Boulder a community that is welcoming and safe to all who live here, who work here, and who visit here. They should all be welcome in Boulder, they should all come to Boulder, and they should all feel safe doing so. It's necessary that this conversation takes place tonight, and so we can think about how we all learn to become better, how we learn to evolve, how we can do this as a community. And the Boulder Chamber is committed to advancing this. We're committed to advancing inclusivity within. We're committed to advancing inclusivity amongst all our partners. And we're committed to advancing inclusivity within the broader business community in Boulder. We got to move forward on this path together. Economically, we have opportunities to improve areas like hiring practices, workplace cultures, engaging volunteers, how businesses choose vendors, securing resources for our community, and who those resources serve. So with that being said, this is a journey that the Boulder Chamber is committed to taking with all of you, that we should be taking as a community together. And we look forward to the effort in taking on that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Guillermo? And then Bima Bacchus.
Sorry. Whatever I say right now, it's going to be pretty redundant because we've said multiple things, but I want to share a story. I came here. Yeah, here. I came here 6.5 years ago, and Boulder told me Boulder's white, Boulder's politically correct, and words matter. If words matter and Boulder's white, it means that white words matter more than our Latino identities, our people of color, all our identities. I work with the Boulder County in the program for cultural brokers. What we are doing is trying to bring the stories of the community that are not just good stories. They are stories of resiliency. And we want to bring all members of the community. So I implore the county, the city council, and all members of the community, as you go and look for committees for reconciliation to make reparation, please look out in the community. We are here, we're diverse. Boulder's not white. Boulder is diverse, and we need to start breaking that narrative. And as we move forward and we bring members of the community, we need to stop tokenizing. We need to start giving the right resources to the community, not just bringing for conversation, bringing power, bringing resources, paying for their time, and valuing all the resources that we have. We might have different languages, we might have different views in the community, but we need to stop talking about Boulder as a white community. We are more diverse than that, and we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo. We are joined by Councilmember Bob Yates, who had a prior engagement. Bima.
Hello, my name is Bima. I live in Longmont. I was born in Boulder Community Hospital on Arapahoe and Foothills. I think we've heard a lot tonight that has spanned the spectrum. I've heard a lot of anger tonight. I've heard a lot of attempts at reconciliation and others that have simply vented. And I think I had an impulse to come up here and maybe talk about that, but what I realized is that every single speaker up here has come from a place of personal pain. And so even if you don't agree with everything that has been said up here tonight, I think it is important to remember that these issues are real. These aren't just some sensationalized headlines on a newspaper. These are things that are endemic to the community, and that if we want to have a conversation that isn't accusatory, then first we need to work on making sure that we hold ourselves responsible. I think that NIMBYism is a big problem in Boulder. I think people want to design a community that looks exactly like them and excludes everybody else. And I think that is completely antithetical to equality in general, as well as to the spirit of America. George Washington's farewell address, it gets quoted all the time by like conspiracy theorists who talk about the military-industrial complex, which is important. But I think a more relevant passage here is where he calls for us not to intentionally sabotage our own citizens, but instead to unite as one American people for liberty. And that's not going to happen if we let injustices pass without accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Bima. Erica?
I'm going to read from some notes. In the white majority in Boulder, a completely blind and insanely positive feedback loop is thriving, that it is conscious, it is mindful, it is progressive, that it is unbiased. These gross understatements of subliminal and implicit bias is the poison that is perpetuating the kind of systemically motored, discriminating culture that has allowed and continues to allow for something as traumatizing and dehumanizing as what happened earlier this month. I'm sorry. I know this because I am a white cisgender female, and I'm a part of that dominant population-wise community. I know that the conversations that are happening tonight are not happening in a lot of places, in CrossFit gyms and coffee shops and yoga studios. It's a different version of conversation. I implore City Council to set an aggressive standard to change that narrative, starting by supporting an independent community oversight board. And I want to thank what Guillermo just said. That's so appreciated. And I know what I just said kind of counters that. And when I talk about a white majority, it's just by population, and that's it. We're better than this. So thank you, Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Next up is Cynthia Beard. Hey, Lynette, can you, the number keeps going up. How many more people do we have? Not that I mind. We're used to being here late, but I know not all of you are.
58.
58. Okay. Well, this evening being what it is, we're not going to cut people off, so, but understand if you don't feel like staying. Okay, Cynthia. Cynthia here?
Right here.
Thank you. And then Robert Sharp.
When my husband, who is a person of color, was threatened with a taser and hogtied by Boulder police officers in 2016, he was subsequently accused of assaulting the officers who had harmed him. My husband still has chronic pain in his thumbs from pain compliance methods that the officers used that night. I momentarily thought that night that they had killed him. Under the leadership of Stan Garnett, a prosecutor specifically mentioned my husband's support for Black Lives Matter in the closing arguments of the trial as part of her attempt to argue that my husband had a supposedly anti-police bias. This is the risk that any person of color who speaks out about racial injustice faces here. Incidentally, the prosecutor also sent 4 officers to our home just a few days before the trial to have him rearrested for bogus charges that were later dismissed. My husband was acquitted of assault as the officer's testimony at trial was inconsistent with the body camera footage that we thankfully were able to obtain. In spite of the fact that the same officer who pulled the taser on my husband proceeded to use lethal force less than 2 months later and has a history of traumatic brain injuries, he has remained employed by the BPD. We still have PTSD from that ordeal. I have video footage of 2 officers shining flashlights into our home security camera at 3 a.m. on our wedding anniversary, a few months after the trial. It's been said that trust is established through consistency over time. Based on the many years of listening sessions, not to mention the city's origins and violence on stolen land, what I can trust is that this current process will be more empty words with no measurable change. Yet, I continue to hope that city leadership will begin to take responsibility and hold itself accountable for the ongoing systemic racism that permeates this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Robert?
Thank you. I grew up in a home. It was very strong, Christian only, and yet I feel very privileged that I've studied every religion that came along and have found value and found a mutuality of love every other, be compassionate, be helpful, be forgiving, even to murderers, to the worst kind of things, be forgiving, and everyone has possibility of redemption. This is our mutuality of all religions and all spiritual paths. I grew up in a home of terrible violence, actually, and yet great peace. And I'm thankful I've chosen the path of peace and not violence towards others, at least not by intention. There are many kinds of violence: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And we all suffer them, every color, every religion, every kind of people, we suffer. This is our mutuality of pain. And I grew up in a home of strong racism also, and I feel privileged that I've come to know all races, all kinds of people. I consider a great privilege to have come to know and appreciate and love and be loved by all kinds of people from all over the world. This is our mutuality also. There are many kinds of prejudice. Racism is one of the worst, but there are many. There is sexism, there is ageism, there is sexualityism, there's beliefism, there is physical size and shapeism, there's mental abilityism, and all of these isms and prejudices we share among us. I also am a person of color. White, tan, cream are also colors. I hope that we might choose some other language that will not be so us and them, people of color. I am a person of color also, and I hope that we will all care for each other.
Thank you, Robert. Felicia? Is that Felicia? If Felicia Plus is here, come on up. Otherwise, Jay Matthews. Is Jay here? Okay, Zoe Sherry. Is Zoe here? Okay. And
hi, I'm Felicia Plus. When I walk into a room, I'm aware of how physically looked down I am. When people just see me, I'm looked down on, and I have to deal with that, and I've had to deal with that my whole life. My son is looks like a little white boy, and my concern is how he's going to grow up and how I'm going to teach him how to consider what he needs to think about. So some things that we try to do is to take a look around at our surroundings and see what our community looks like, to see how many people of color are in the room, in your grocery stores, the libraries, the bus stops. The restaurants are very interesting in Boulder. You don't even see people of color waiting the tables. I also encourage you to check your privilege tonight and honor how privileged we are to have people of color and minority speakers take time out of their lives to speak with you, and to know deep inside that it is not the job of the minority to teach you how to respect, honor, and how to take action. I believe we as humans have a deep biological need to belong, but when you don't belong, it's just hard. Thank you. Good night.
thank you, Felicia. Jay?
Hey, good evening, everyone.
My name's Jay. I just want to be here to represent and speak in solidarity. Solidarity for my brother, solidarity for my sisters. I think there's something that's being lost in this conversation, and it's team human. We're all in this together. If there's a famine, if there's bad water, if the air in this Boulder County is polluted and gray and brown, as I'm sure you've all noticed, we all breathe it. Now, there's been a lot of people up here who've spoken about the police department and their experiences. Being a man of color in Boulder for 12 years, previous business owner, property owner, I've dealt with it. From the sheriffs to the Boulder PD. I'm not gonna go down that road and get frustrated and vent, but I do want to speak on some things. You know, an independent oversight committee, I think that's the least that we should do. Run by the committee of people, the people of Boulder, not just white people, not just black people, not just gay, lesbian, men, women, all of us. You know, another thing I'd like to speak about is the judicial system. You know, I don't expect Boulder to change the world, but, you know, the judicial system needs to change from the top down, and I think, you know, city council, you know, these higher branches of government, that would be a beautiful place for these changes to start. You know, another speaker mentioned 12% of Boulder arrests are minorities and only 2% of the Boulder population is minority. Well, that doesn't include all the people who, like this gentleman here, who get hassled. What about all of that? I mean, let's really open up this conversation and not just have a conversation, but let's take some action. Talk is cheap. Talk is easy. I mean, we can all come here, we can feel great, kumbaya moment, woohoo, go Boulder. But that doesn't make anything change. That doesn't make anything happen. You know, I'd just like to say a few other things real quick. You know, the police, you know, their motto is to protect and serve. That's what they're supposed to do, to protect the community and serve the community of people. Not just white people, not just women, not just men, not just whoever, all of us. And, you know, being on this planet for 40 years now, I've seen a lot of intimidation and incarceration by the police departments. East, west, north, south, in this country. What is that? I'd like everybody to think about that for a moment. When was the last time you saw police hold a bake sale? When was the last time you saw the police go to a school and you know, just educate some children? You know, show up and just be happy and friendly and kind of just do some community outreach. You know, I love the talk about programs and anger management and, you know, the police having restraint and how to deal with conflict, this and that. Well, that's not protecting and serving. Yeah, that's a start. That should be the minimum. That should happen anyway. You know, and, you know, I remember, you know, I want to mention one more thing. You know, at the top, you know, we had Hillary Clinton. You know, we have a lot of white people at the top. It's been that way since the beginning of this country. You know, I remember when Hillary said, you know, black men, they're super predators. You know, I'm sorry, my brother. I am sorry that this nonsense happened to you. I'm sorry you have to be here. From my heart to yours, that should never have happened. You know how I learned about this? I learned about this from my mother. I'm biracial. My mother on the East Coast called me and said, hey, did you see what the Boulder Police Department did today? I said, no, Mom, I didn't. What did they do? She said, oh, there was a guy in his front yard picking up trash. Now, when have you ever heard of somebody trespassing to pick up trash? Okay, maybe it happens. No problem. You know, maybe it happens. Who is that hurting? We got Captain Planet walking around picking up trash in somebody else's yard. So what? That doesn't take 8, 9, 10, however many officers. So, you know, I just want to say, you know, we're not super predators. We're just like you. We're just like you. We're just like you and your son and your daughter. We're all in this together, team human, and I think that's what needs to be remembered. And not just talk, action. An independent oversight committee with broad-reaching power not just a committee to have more conversation, broad-reaching power. If somebody makes a mistake, if the police show up and somebody has made a mistake, you know, amongst the black community, I talk with my brothers, you know, and we get together, and one of the first things we do, you know, and this might hurt to hear, but this is real. One of the first things we do, oh, did you get hassled? Oh, did you get hassled? What did you experience? Oh, and we kind of have to clear the air, get rid of that frustration, just let it go by the wayside before we can really just be. And that should not happen. 2019, especially in Boulder. This place is supposed to be so progressive. Progressive, you know? Like, let's make some real progress. Let's actually give some power to the people. Because if the police show up and someone made a mistake, you know, especially if it's a black man and he didn't even make a mistake, but if they view that black man as a threat, you know, we got this joke, shoot him in the face. I'll say it one more time, shoot him in the face. My wife asked me, why don't we go out more? Why don't you like to go out to the bars and have a dinner and have some drinks sometimes? You know why? Because I fear. I fear some overzealous police officer and his other officers might see me as a threat. You know, there was a DEA agent in a club in Denver last year, I believe. You know, this club, no weapons, no firearms allowed. This DEA officer, not only did he break the laws of the clubs by bringing in a firearm, he also carelessly carried that firearm. Not only did he do that, but he also decided he was gonna be Joe Cool and do backflips on the dance floor with his carelessly carried firearm. The gun fell out of his hip, wherever it was in his pocket, shot some innocent bystander. What happened to this man? I believe he got probation. Probation. Now, if that would have been a black man, what do you all think would have happened to him? Shoot him in the face. That's what would have happened to him. There would have been numerous police officers there. If he even made it out of the building, he would still be in jail right now. This shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. Let's all reach deep and make some real changes. You know, City Council, please, please, I beg you, let us form a committee and give them broad-reaching powers so that as the police do to the citizens that they are hired, paid for by tax dollars to protect and serve, those same citizens can hold accountable the police officers if they do the opposite of protecting and serving. And that's, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Give you a hug, my man.
Lynn. Zoe?
Okay, just give me a quick sec to catch my breath. Okay, first, I'm very sorry for what happened to you. It was completely wrong. This is not the Boulder that I want to have, so I'm so sorry for you that that happened. Secondly, I want to say that one of the things that I have learned during my life is that being anti-racist is not an identity, it's an activity. And an activity is only true if you keep doing it. So I want to ask every representative of the City of Boulder government and the police and the citizens of the City of Boulder, what anti-racist activities are you doing? It's not an identity. You can't wear it. You have to do it. So I want to ask, like, really ask yourselves, what activities are you doing that are anti-racist? I also just want to ask, like, if these officers are not held accountable for what they did, in what way can we expect people of color to feel safe in Boulder? And just like, if these officers are not held accountable, in what way is a 3-month investigation not just a stalling tactic? So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Daniel Hauser. And then Avi Cheritek.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Zaid. First, I just want to take a few breaths for myself, but I want to invite everyone else to do the same thing. So just, yeah, taking a few breaths. thank you. I'm a student at Naropa. I am a friend of Zaid. I remember one time you said, I overheard you say that you weren't supposed to be here. And I wanted to, this was prior to this thing that happened to you. But I wanted to come up and say that you are supposed to be here and that you belong here and that I'm really glad you're here. And that all the pain that people of color in the room have experienced in Boulder. For me, as someone who lives in Boulder and as someone who's white, I feel like it needs to be acknowledged, and it also needs to be acknowledged that you belong here, and that, that we love you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Oh, man. Avi, I think you're our last speaker.
First, I'd like to echo what Daniel just said and say that, Zaid, we're just so glad to have you with part of our community, and just really cherish the fact that we can still say that. So I also want to echo all of the sentiments that have been made for a request for oversight and speak about that big elephant in the room across our country, which is that great blue wall of silence, and ask that we look at that just as critically as we look at other issues. And we really ask ourselves, what can we implement to really tackle this issue? I do think it begins with a community oversight board. On a personal note, I am really curious what I am going to be facing as a future educator in Boulder Valley School District. I'm in the elementary education department program at Naropa. And I think about these challenges that I'm going to have to talk with my students about. Just the other week, I was talking with a group of fifth graders about my grandmother's experience in the Holocaust. And I was challenged by the question of, why did this happen? And it was one of the hardest questions for me to answer. And I can only imagine how hard it's going to be when those case studies are about our own communities, right here in Boulder. And these are the challenges that I'm unfortunately looking forward at having to have with my future students here in Boulder County. So I ask what we can do to improve that situation.
Thank you, Avi. I want to thank you all again, each and every one, for coming here. We've heard some pretty heart-wrenching stuff. We've heard about some horrifying events that took a lot of courage and vulnerability to share. We also heard about just what a drag it is to be a person of color here in Boulder, and that's really hard to hear. Everything we know about this event, this incident, is we're not allowed to use the word concerning. It is incredibly troubling, and we condemn what it is that we think it means. I think I speak for all of us in that regard. I am sorry for what you've experienced. I am glad, however, for the chance for us to have this conversation, even though I'm sure it feels like we've had it more than once, and we're going to have it. It is an ongoing process. Yesterday, I was at the Islamic Center of Boulder for a 2.5-hour vigil, and I was glad to be there too. And it was this amazing interfaith unity coming together in solidarity for the victims in Christchurch. But we were there because people were gunned down for being Muslim, and which is so. Anyhow, I guess what I want to say is I'm thankful for this community. I am very thankful for the progress we are going to make. What I heard tonight was a very loud call for action. We hear you. You can hold us accountable on that front. I don't pretend it's easy in any regards. It's going to take all of us, but we will see that through. All just also, and kind of where I started with, which is this is really big stuff. It's much bigger than the behavior by some individuals. I mean, tomorrow we're going to go into 2 days of government-to-government consultation with the 14 tribes that called this place their ancestral homelands. I don't know what you do with that. How do you begin that reconciliation? But we're gonna try that tomorrow. So anyhow, thank you again. Let us continue this journey together. You'll be hearing more from us in the days and weeks and months. Hold us accountable. Hold our community accountable. And thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Live from Paris, on France 24.